The polished mahogany of the dining table reflected the cold, accusatory glare of the chandelier above. It was a sterile light, one that bleached all warmth from the room and left only sharp edges and hard truths. Across the vast expanse of wood, Arthur Preston slid a single sheet of paper toward his son-in-law, Liam. The gesture was slow, deliberate, a king pushing a pawn into a sacrificial square. Liam watched it come to a stop just beside his water glass. He didn't need to look at it to know what it was. He had been anticipating this precise moment for 6 months. Arthur leaned back in his high-backed chair, a portrait of magnanimous authority. His wife Eleanor sat beside him, her posture rigid, her expression a mask of disappointed patience. She was the architect of this confrontation. Arthur was merely the edifice. "Liam," Arthur began, his voice a low rumble that had intimidated lesser men for decades. "We've given you 6 months, a grace period you might call it. Time to settle into your new life, your new responsibilities." Liam met his father-in-law's gaze. He did not speak. He simply waited. In the silence, he could feel the frantic, unspoken plea from his wife, Chloe, who sat beside him. "Just agree. Just be pleasant. Don't make this difficult." Her hand was a knot of tension on her lap, her knuckles white. She was a silent enabler, a spectator in the arena of her own marriage. "The wedding," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the quiet like shattering glass, "was a magnificent affair, befitting of our daughter, of our family." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Not befitting of you. We were happy to provide it. We understood at the time that it was beyond your means." Every word was a carefully polished stone, smooth on the surface, but designed to inflict a deep, internal bruise. Liam's gaze remained steady. His heart rate was as calm as a sleeping lake. They saw a struggling architect, a man of modest talent and even more modest prospects, who had somehow managed to capture the heart of their only daughter. They saw a project, a fixer-upper. They had no idea they were not the builders, but merely tenants in a structure he had designed and built around them. Within the next 10 minutes, their entire world, built on the flimsy foundations of status and assumption, would be demolished. Do you ever feel like you're the only one in the room who knows the truth? It's a strange, lonely kind of power. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to hold your tongue, waiting for the perfect moment to set the record straight. And while you're down there, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of long-awaited justice. We love knowing where our viewers are watching from, so drop your city or country and become part of our global community. Now, let's watch what happens when the bill comes due. "The total cost," Arthur continued, tapping a manicured finger on the paper Liam still hadn't looked at, "came to $250,000, a significant sum, but we spared no expense for Chloe's special day." He offered a thin, patronizing smile. "We aren't asking for it all at once, of course. We've had our lawyers draw up a manageable repayment plan, a loan, if you will, at a very favorable family interest rate." Liam finally lowered his eyes to the paper. It was an itemized invoice, beautifully printed on heavy cream-colored stock. Venue rental, $80,000. Catering, 300 guests, $65,000. Floral arrangements, $35,000. It was all there, a testament to their generosity, a monument to his perceived inadequacy. He thought of the small, unassuming leather portfolio inside his briefcase, resting against the leg of his chair. It was a quiet bomb, filled not with numbers on a page, but with devastating facts. It contained the real invoices, the ones marked "paid in full." "This is very thorough," Liam said, his voice even and calm. The quietness of it seemed to unnerve them more than any outburst would have. He looked at Chloe. Her eyes were pleading with him. "Don't fight them, please." She had made her choice long ago, the choice to stand in the middle, which was, in itself, a choice to stand with them. "We believe in clarity," Eleanor said, misinterpreting his calm for capitulation. "It's important for a man to understand his obligations. This is your opportunity, Liam, to step up, to show us that you are capable of providing for our daughter in the manner to which she is accustomed." The phrase hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The manner to which she is accustomed. It was the foundation of their entire worldview, a world of appearances, of status bought and paid for, of worth measured in dollars and cents. Liam folded the invoice in half, then in half again, the creases sharp and precise. He placed the small, neat square on the table. He looked from Arthur to Eleanor, his gaze holding them in place. "You're right," he said softly. The words dropped into the silence, each one landing with immense weight. "It is time to be clear about obligations, and it's time for the person who actually paid for the wedding to be acknowledged." He reached down, his hand closing around the handle of his briefcase. The click of the latches opening was the only sound in the room. It sounded like the cocking of a gun. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged a look of pure confusion. Chloe just stared, a dawning horror on her face, finally realizing this was not a negotiation. It was a reckoning. The beginning of the end had started a year earlier, on a crisp autumn evening, not unlike this one. Liam had proposed to Chloe in the small, beautifully curated Japanese garden he had designed pro bono for a local conservancy. It was their place. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. He had presented her not with a massive, ostentatious diamond, but with a unique, custom-designed ring featuring a rare sea-green sapphire set between two smaller, architecturally cut diamonds, representing the three pillars of a strong relationship: him, her, and the life they would build together. Chloe had loved it. She had wept, her tears mingling with the evening mist. "It's perfect, Liam. It's us." The first meeting with her parents as an engaged couple was, in retrospect, the first crack in the foundation. They met for dinner at the Gilded Lantern, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign. Arthur and Eleanor Preston greeted him with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They admired the ring with faint praise. "How unique," Eleanor had said, her eyes flicking to her own hand, which sported a diamond the size of a robin's egg. Over appetizers, they began their gentle, systematic dismantling of his life. "So, Liam," Arthur said, swirling his wine, a vintage that cost more than Liam's monthly rent. "Chloe tells us you're an architect, a noble profession. Any major projects we might have heard of?" It was a test. Liam knew it. He ran a boutique firm, Odyssey Architecture, under a deliberately low-profile business name. His work was specialized. He designed and consulted on the structural and aesthetic integrity of secure, high-tech commercial buildings, data fortresses, private research labs, and the occasional billionaire's panic room. His clients valued absolute discretion. His name was never on a press release, but his bank account reflected the high-stakes nature of his work. He was, to put it simply, exceptionally wealthy. But it was a quiet wealth, built on intellect and competence, not on a family name. "I run a small specialized firm," Liam answered honestly. "We focus on commercial infrastructure. It's mostly technical work, not the kind of thing that ends up in magazines." "Ah," Arthur nodded, the single syllable dripping with condescension. "A specialist. Very good. Important work, I'm sure." He shared a look with Eleanor. The verdict had been delivered. Niche. Unprofitable. Unimpressive. Eleanor took over. "And your family, Liam, are they in the city?" "My parents passed away when I was in college," he said. The old ache, a familiar dull throb. "I was raised by my grandfather. He was a stonemason." "A tradesman," Eleanor murmured. And though she smiled, the words landed like a judgment. She looked at Chloe, a flicker of pity in her eyes. "My poor daughter, marrying an orphan of no breeding." The conversation turned to the wedding. "Well," Arthur declared, placing his napkin on the table as if closing a business deal, "we won't have Chloe and Liam worrying about finances. This is our gift. We will handle everything. We want you to have the wedding you deserve, darling," he said to his daughter, "without the burden." Chloe beamed, oblivious to the subtext. "Oh, Daddy, thank you. That's so generous." Liam felt a chill. It wasn't a gift. It was a transaction. It was the purchase of control. They were establishing from the outset that he was a junior partner in this merger, a man who required their financial backing to even stand at the altar. "That's incredibly generous, Arthur," Liam said, his tone perfectly measured, "but I can't let you do that." Arthur waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. Don't be proud, son. We know what young architects make. We want to do this. For Chloe." And there it was, the trap. If he argued, he was proud and insecure. If he accepted, he was admitting his inadequacy. Chloe looked at him, her eyes wide. Just accept. It's easier. So he made a strategic choice, a calculated retreat that would allow him to win the war. All right, he said, a faint smile on his lips. If you insist, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of your generosity. Thank you. Eleanor's smile was triumphant. She had won the first battle. She had established dominance. She looked at Liam with the satisfaction of a collector who had just acquired a new, slightly flawed piece for her display. Later that night, as Liam drove Chloe home, she was effusive. Weren't they wonderful? It's so amazing that they're taking care of everything. Now, we can have that beautiful wedding at the conservatory without worrying about a thing. Liam stayed quiet for a long moment. Chloe, he said carefully, does it bother you that they think I can't provide for you? She laughed, a light tinkling sound that suddenly grated on him. Oh, Liam, don't be so sensitive. They're just being traditional. They know you work hard. They just want to help. It's what parents do. He didn't push it. He saw for the first time the deep, invisible currents of her upbringing. She had been raised in a world where love and money were inextricably linked, where help was a tool for control, and she had never learned to see the difference. That night, alone in his minimalist apartment, overlooking the city, Liam made a phone call. Marcus, he said, speaking to his longtime financial advisor and friend, I need you to open a new temporary account. I'm going to transfer $1 million into it. I have a project. As he spoke, he looked at a framed photo on his desk. It was of his grandfather, a man with calloused hands, a kind face, and a spine made of granite. His grandfather had taught him two things: how to build things that last, and that a man's worth is measured not by the contents of his wallet, but by the strength of his character and the truth of his word. The Prestons were about to receive a master class in both. Liam would let them build their castle of arrogance on the sand of their assumptions. He would even provide the materials, and then he would show them what a real foundation looked like. Just before the tide came in, the wedding planning began, and with it, the methodical erosion of Liam's dignity. It was a master class in passive aggression, a slow-motion assault cloaked in the language of taste and generosity. Eleanor Preston became the supreme commander of the entire operation, and Liam and Chloe were reduced to foot soldiers, their opinions noted and then immediately discarded. The first casualty was the venue. Liam and Chloe had dreamed of getting married at the city's botanical conservatory, a place of glass and light and living things. It was meaningful to them. It was where they had their third date, where they decided they were serious about each other. Oh, the conservatory is charming, Eleanor said during their first planning meeting at her sprawling Georgian-style home. The word charming was delivered with the same enthusiasm one might use for a well-behaved toddler. But it's rather small, isn't it? And the public access a bit unseemly. Your father and I have business associates, politicians. We need a certain level of security, and frankly, stature. She had already prepared an alternative. She slid a glossy brochure across the marble-topped coffee table. The Argento Club. It was an old-money country club, a bastion of beige carpets and hushed whispers. Its primary features seemed to be its exclusivity and its staggering price tag. The Argento is the only appropriate choice, Eleanor declared, not asked. We've had a family membership for generations. They can accommodate 400 guests with ease. 400? Liam asked, startled. Our list was closer to 150. Eleanor smiled a tight, reptilian smile. Your list, perhaps. But a wedding is not just about the bride and groom, Liam. It is the merging of two families, two legacies. Our guest list is extensive. Liam looked at Chloe, expecting her to protest, to fight for their conservatory, for their intimate wedding. But Chloe was captivated by the photos of the Argento's grand ballroom, with its crystal chandeliers and gilded columns. Wow, Mom, it's beautiful. It's like a palace. It is, Eleanor agreed, her eyes gleaming with victory. And my daughter will be married like a princess. Liam felt a profound sense of erasure. This was no longer his wedding. He was becoming a decorative accessory, the groom-to-be, a necessary component, but not a vital one. He saw the path ahead, a series of concessions, each one chipping away at his identity. He could fight, causing a rift between Chloe and her mother, and forever being labeled as difficult and ungrateful. Or he could yield, preserving a fragile peace while his own desires were paved over. He chose a third option. He smiled. The Argento it is. If it makes you and Chloe happy, then it's the perfect choice. Eleanor looked momentarily surprised by his easy acquiescence, but quickly recovered. Excellent. I'll have my assistant book it tomorrow. That evening, Liam made another call. It was to the events manager at the Argento Club, a woman named Beatrice. He had designed a state-of-the-art wine cellar for one of the club's board members a few years prior, a project that had been, as usual, discreet and highly lucrative. Beatrice, it's Liam Hennessy, he said. Mr. Hennessy, what a surprise. Is the cellar holding up? Perfectly, I hope. Listen, Beatrice, I have a strange request. My future mother-in-law, Eleanor Preston, will be calling tomorrow to book the ballroom for my wedding. She will want to pay the deposit and handle all the arrangements. I need you to let her. There was a pause. Okay. But, Liam continued, all final invoices, every single expense, are to be sent directly to a holding company I've established, Odyssey Holdings. My financial manager, Marcus Thorne, will be the point of contact. Under no circumstances is any payment to be accepted from Arthur or Eleanor Preston. As far as the club's books are concerned, the Preston wedding is to be paid in full by my company. But as far as Mrs. Preston is concerned, she is in complete control of the finances. Can you ensure that discretion? Beatrice was silent for a moment. She had been in the business of managing the whims of the wealthy for a long time. She understood the subtle currents of power and pride. So, you want her to think she's paying, but you're actually footing the bill? Precisely, Liam said. I want her to have the satisfaction. Just send the bills to Marcus. Consider it done, Mr. Hennessy. And congratulations on your engagement. He hung up and drew a line through the first item on a list he was making in a simple black notebook. Venue. The humiliations continued, each one more refined than the last. Next came the catering. Eleanor dismissed their idea of interactive food stations as tacky and downmarket. Instead, she insisted on a 5-course seated dinner, with wine pairings selected by Arthur. The menu she chose was a symphony of imported delicacies: Caspian caviar, Japanese Wagyu beef, truffles flown in from Italy. During the tasting, the chef presented a sea bass entree. Liam remarked that it was excellent. Eleanor patted his hand. I'm so glad you're enjoying it, dear. It's probably not something you're used to, but it's important to develop a palate for these things. Chloe giggled, thinking her mother was just being endearingly snobbish. Liam smiled politely, thinking of the Michelin-starred restaurants he'd dined in across Tokyo, Paris, and Copenhagen on his business trips. Trips Chloe thought were to inspect concrete suppliers in drab industrial parks. He made a mental note, and later that day called Marcus, the caterer, Le Papillon Blanc. Same arrangement as the club. Let them send their menus and their bills. We pay for everything. Mrs. Preston gets a dummy invoice to approve. Then came the flowers. Chloe loved wildflowers, daisies, lavender, baby's breath. She wanted bouquets that looked like they'd been gathered from a meadow. Oh, darling. No, Eleanor sighed, looking at Chloe's Pinterest board with undisguised horror. That's for a barn wedding, a country affair. We are at the Argento. We need structure, elegance. We need orchids, thousands of them, and Casablanca lilies, and peonies flown in from Holland. She turned to Liam. You understand, don't you, Liam? The visual impact is paramount. It speaks to the importance of the occasion. Liam, whose entire career was based on understanding visual impact and structural integrity, simply nodded. Orchids sound lovely, Eleanor. He kept his own counsel. He kept his dignity. In his briefcase, he started a new file. It was a simple manila envelope, and inside it, he began to place copies of the wire transfers Marcus was making on his behalf. The first one was for the deposit on the Argento Club, a quiet, unassuming piece of paper that represented more money than the Prestons thought he made in a year. The envelope felt cool and heavy in his hands. It was the physical manifestation of his patience. It was the foundation of the reckoning to come. He was building his case, brick by silent brick. The campaign of subtle disparagement wasn't confined to the wedding plans. It bled into every corner of Liam's life, a slow-acting poison. Arthur Preston, in a grand gesture of paternal largesse, insisted on taking Liam to his personal tailor for his wedding suit. They walked into the hushed, wood-paneled boutique, a place that smelled of cedar and old money. Arthur greeted the proprietor, an elderly Italian man named Enzo, by his first name. "Enzo, my friend, this is Liam, my future son-in-law. We need to get him properly outfitted for the big day." The implication was clear. Liam's own wardrobe was improper, inadequate. He was wearing a well-fitting but not ostentatious charcoal gray suit from a respectable but not headline-making brand. To Arthur, it was the equivalent of showing up in sackcloth. Enzo, a professional to his core, simply smiled and led Liam to a pedestal in front of a three-way mirror. As he took Liam's measurements, Arthur circled him like a farmer inspecting livestock. "He's got a decent frame, Enzo, but a bit slight. We need something with structure, strong shoulders, nothing too trendy." He looked at Liam's suit. "We need to elevate his look." Liam stood perfectly still, his expression neutral, enduring the assessment. He thought of his own suits, custom-made by a tailor in Savile Row he visited twice a year on his trips to London. They were hanging in his closet, masterpieces of understated elegance, their value known only to him and the man who stitched them. "I was thinking of a classic tuxedo," Liam offered quietly. Arthur chuckled. "Of course, a tuxedo for the ceremony. But I'm talking about for the rehearsal dinner, for life. A man needs a wardrobe, Liam, a foundation. Let's start with a classic navy blazer and a few pairs of tailored trousers. My treat, of course. A welcome to the family gift." It was another gilded cage, a gift that was also an insult. A way to remake Liam in their own image, to strip him of his own choices and replace them with their approved ones. "Thank you, Arthur," Liam said, his voice betraying no emotion. "That's very generous." He allowed them to choose the fabrics, the cut, the buttons. He played the part of the grateful charity case, the blank canvas upon which they could paint their masterpiece of conformity. As they left the shop, Arthur clapped him on the shoulder. "You see? It's easy when you have the right guidance. You'll look like you belong." That single phrase, "you'll look like you belong," echoed in Liam's mind. They didn't want him to be a part of their family. They wanted him to look like a part of their family. It was all about the optics, the flawless facade. The ultimate performance came a month before the wedding, at a lavish engagement party the Prestons threw at their home. It was a sprawling affair, attended by the city's elite. Liam, in his new foundational blazer, felt like an exhibit. Arthur and Eleanor introduced him to their friends with a carefully crafted script. "This is Chloe's fiancé, Liam," Eleanor would say, her hand briefly touching his arm. "He's an architect, just starting out, but full of passion." Arthur would add, "A good, hard-working boy. We're so happy to have him joining the family. Chloe is so in love." The subtext was a blaring foghorn. "He's poor. He's from nothing. But our daughter loves him, so we're graciously tolerating it." Liam would shake hands, smile, and accept their patronizing congratulations. He listened as they talked about their latest acquisitions, yachts, ski chalets, contemporary art. He was an alien, observing a foreign species, a species that communicated its status through a complex language of brand names and asset portfolios. At one point, a portly man named Harrison, a hedge fund manager, cornered him by the champagne fountain. "So, Arthur tells me you're in construction," Harrison boomed, his voice slick with condescension. "I'm an architect," Liam corrected gently. Right, drawing up blueprints. Listen, I've got a piece of land upstate, thinking of building a little cabin. Maybe you could draw something up for me. Do it on the cheap, eh? For family," he winked, as if offering Liam a great opportunity. Liam maintained his smile. "My firm specializes in secure commercial properties, Harrison. I'm probably not the right fit for a cabin, but I could recommend some excellent residential architects." Harrison looked momentarily confused, then clapped him on the back. "Good man, know your limits." He wandered off in search of more important conversations. Liam took a slow sip of his champagne. He watched Chloe across the lawn, laughing with her friends. She was radiant, a princess in her element. She caught his eye and waved a bright, happy gesture, completely unaware of the 1,000 tiny cuts he was enduring for her sake. She saw her parents' behavior as normal, their friends' condescension as a foreign language she didn't need to understand. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from Marcus. "Florist invoice paid. That's a lot of orchids," Liam texted back. "The price of admission." He looked around the perfectly manicured garden, at the smiling faces and glittering jewelry. They were all so confident, so secure in their world, so certain of the hierarchy. They looked at him and saw a footnote in their grand story. They had no idea he was the author. Inside his jacket, he could feel the slight pressure of his wallet against his ribs. It was a comforting weight, but the real weight, the real power, was in the manila envelope now tucked securely in the safe in his apartment. It was getting thicker. It now contained copies of paid invoices for the venue, the caterer, the florist, the band, the calligrapher who had addressed 400 invitations in gold ink. Each piece of paper was a silent testament to the truth. Each one was a promise of the storm that was gathering just over the horizon, a storm they were all too blind to see. Liam was patient. He had learned from his grandfather that the strongest structures are built slowly, with meticulous care, and a foundation that runs deeper than anyone can see from the surface. The wedding day arrived, a spectacle of orchestrated perfection. The Argento Club was transformed into a veritable forest of white orchids and lilies, just as Eleanor had decreed. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and self-satisfaction. Liam stood at the altar, impeccably dressed in the tuxedo Arthur had not paid for, and watched Chloe walk down the aisle on her father's arm. She was breathtaking. For a fleeting moment, all the frustration, all the strategic maneuvering melted away. There was only Chloe, her face a mixture of joy and nervousness, the woman he loved. He loved her optimism, her easy laughter, her fundamental kindness. But as she drew closer, he saw her father's hand on her arm, proprietary and firm, and the illusion shattered. He was not just marrying Chloe, he was marrying into the Preston dynasty, a corporation where he had been assigned the role of an unpaid intern. The ceremony was brief and impersonal, officiated by a judge who was a golfing buddy of Arthur's. The vows they exchanged felt hollow in the cavernous ballroom, swallowed by the sheer scale of the event. It felt less like a sacred union and more like the unveiling of a corporate merger. The reception was where the Prestons' performance reached its zenith. They moved through the crowd with regal grace, accepting compliments on their magnificent party. "Oh, it was nothing," Eleanor would demur, waving a perfectly manicured hand. "We just wanted the best for Chloe." Liam did his duty. He smiled, he danced, he made small talk. He felt a profound disconnect, as if he were watching a film of his own life. He was there, but he was not present. His mind was a quiet, orderly room far away from the noise and the glitter. The climax of the evening was the speeches. Chloe's maid of honor gave a sweet, rambling toast. Liam's best man, his old college roommate, gave a heartfelt speech about Liam's loyalty and integrity, which seemed to fly over the heads of most of the guests. Then, Arthur Preston took the microphone. The room fell silent. Arthur stood in the spotlight, a glass of champagne held aloft. He looked every bit the patriarch, the benevolent king. "To my daughter Chloe and her new husband Liam," he began, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. "Today, my wife and I are not losing a daughter, but we're gaining a son-in-law." A smattering of polite laughter. "Chloe, you have always been the light of our lives. You have a heart of gold, and you see the good in everyone." He glanced at Liam, a truly wonderful quality. The compliment was a dagger wrapped in silk. "When you brought Liam home," Arthur continued, "we saw what you saw. A young man of ambition and principle. A man from a different world than ours perhaps, but one with a good heart." He paused, letting the class distinction settle. "We know he will work hard to give you the life you deserve, and we want him to know we will always be here to support them, to guide them, to provide a safety net as they start their journey." He raised his glass higher. "In today's world, it's not easy for a young couple to get started. It takes more than just love. It takes resources, and we are blessed to have them. so we were overjoyed to give them this day, a foundation upon which they can build their future. He looked directly at Liam, a look of smug magnanimity on his face. Welcome to the family, son. Don't worry, we'll take good care of you. The room erupted in applause. Guests dabbed at their eyes, moved by his apparent generosity. Liam stood beside Chloe, a polite smile fixed on his face. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, all seeing the same thing, the charity case, the lucky boy who married up. Chloe squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears. Wasn't that beautiful? She whispered. Liam looked at her, truly looked at her. She was so caught up in the fairy tale that she couldn't see the transactional nature of the script. She heard love and support. He heard a declaration of ownership. He raised his own glass, meeting Arthur's gaze across the room. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, but not of submission. Arthur, mistaking it for gratitude, smiled benevolently. Later, as the party raged on, Liam found a moment of quiet on a deserted balcony overlooking the golf course. The cool night air was a relief. He loosened his bow tie and took a deep breath. The distant music, the laughter, it all felt a world away. He pulled his phone from his pocket. There was one last message from Marcus, sent hours earlier. Final payment to orchestra processed. Total expenditure, $782,451.37. The file is complete. Good luck, my friend. Liam typed a simple reply. Thank you. The performance is almost over. He looked up at the stars, cold and distant in the night sky. He thought of his grandfather, the stonemason, who used to say that you could judge a man's work by how it settled. A poorly built wall would show its cracks after the first winter. A well-built one would only grow stronger. The Preston family, for all their wealth and polish, had built their lives on a foundation of sand. They had mistaken money for worth and arrogance for strength. They thought they had built him a gilded cage, but they had only provided the materials for their own reckoning. The wedding was over. The settling was about to begin. 6 months. He would give it 6 months. He would play the part of the dutiful son-in-law, the grateful husband. He would give Chloe every chance to see the truth, to choose her own foundation. He would wait for the first winter to see where the cracks appeared, and so we returned to the dinner table. 6 months later, the air is thick with the silence that followed Liam's quiet declaration. The polished surface of the table separates them like a chasm. Arthur and Eleanor Preston are frozen, their expressions a mixture of confusion and nascent indignation. The script has been deviated from. The pawn has refused to be sacrificed. What did you just say? Arthur asked, his voice low and dangerous. The benevolent patriarch has vanished, replaced by the ruthless businessman. I said, Liam repeated, his voice still infuriatingly calm, that it's time for the person who actually paid for the wedding to be acknowledged. He reached down and lifted his briefcase onto his lap. It was a simple, elegant piece of black leather, a stark contrast to the ornate decor of the room. The clicks of the latches echoed in the tense silence. Chloe watched him, her face pale, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. This was not the Liam she knew, the agreeable, peacekeeping man who always deferred to her parents. This was a stranger. From the briefcase, he withdrew not a sheaf of papers, but a portfolio. It was bound in the same black leather, its contents hidden. He placed it on the center of the table with a soft, definitive thud. It sat there between them, a silent monolith. I don't understand this game, Liam, Eleanor said, her voice sharp. If this is some misguided attempt to bargain, to suggest you contributed in some small way. There's no game, Eleanor, Liam said, his eyes meeting hers. For the first time, she saw not the deferential son-in-law, but a man of absolute, unshakable authority. It was so unexpected that she flinched. There is only the truth, and a great deal of paperwork. He opened the portfolio. Inside, it was meticulously organized with labeled tabs. He turned to the first section. Let's start with the invoice you presented me. He gestured to the folded square of paper on the table. $250,000, an impressive number, but an incorrect one. He slid the first document from the portfolio across the table. It was the master budget spreadsheet he and Marcus had maintained. At the bottom, in a bold, clear font, was the grand total, $782,451.37. Arthur squinted at the number, then scoffed. That's absurd. Ridiculous. Where did you get this fantasy figure? From the vendors, Liam replied smoothly. He turned to the next tab, labeled Argento Club. He pulled out a thick stack of papers and fanned them out. This is the complete file from the venue. The initial contract, all the addendums for additional security, the late-night bar extension Arthur insisted on, the valet service for 400 guests. And here, he pointed to the final page, is the final invoice for $194,000, not $80,000. He then slid another document across. It was a bank statement from a corporate account for a company named Odyssey Holdings. It showed a wire transfer to the Argento Club for the full amount. The transfer was dated 2 weeks before the wedding. At the bottom of the statement was the signatory, Liam Hennessy, CEO. Eleanor snatched the papers. Her eyes scanned the documents, her perfectly composed face beginning to crumble. This is a mistake. We paid the deposit. I wrote the check myself. You did, Liam agreed. And the club, on my instruction, returned the check to your bank the next day. You can check your statements. You probably assumed it was a clerical error that worked in your favor. It wasn't, he continued, his movements methodical, relentless. He turned to the tab marked Catering. Le Papillon Blanc. You budgeted $65,000. A reasonable guess, but the final cost, after the vintage champagne you insisted on, and the extra course of Wagyu beef for the head table, was $128,000. He produced the invoice, marked Paid in Full, and the corresponding wire transfer from Odyssey Holdings. Next, florals. Eleanor, your vision for the flowers was truly spectacular. All those orchids from Holland and peonies from New Zealand. The final bill from the florist was $72,000, not $35,000. Again, he produced the proof. The paid invoice, the bank record. He went on. The band, the photographer, the lighting designer, the calligrapher, the custom ice sculptures, the party favors, which were small, engraved silver boxes from Tiffany and Company that Eleanor had deemed a necessary touch. Each time, he presented the actual, inflated invoice, and each time, he presented the irrefutable proof of payment from his own company. The pile of documents in front of Arthur and Eleanor grew. Their faces, which had begun in confusion, had passed through anger and were now entering the pale, cold territory of shock. They were drowning in a sea of facts, and every piece of paper was another wave crashing over their heads. Chloe was staring at Liam, her mouth slightly agape. She looked from the mountain of evidence to her husband's calm, resolute face. Liam, what is Odyssey Holdings? Liam finally turned his full attention to her. His expression softened, but only slightly. The hurt was there, deep in his eyes. It's the parent company for my architecture firm, Chloe. The one your parents decided was a quaint, unprofitable hobby. He reached back into the portfolio. He pulled out one last document. It wasn't an invoice. It was the cover of an obscure, highly respected industry journal, Global Structural Security. The headline read, The Odyssey Protocol, How Liam Hennessy is Redefining Secure Architecture. Below it was a picture of him, not in a suit, but on a construction site, wearing a hard hat and pointing at a complex blueprint. My work is discreet, he said, his voice low and for their ears only. My clients are governments, tech giants, and financial institutions. They don't want their architect's name in Architectural Digest. They want their multi-billion-dollar assets to be safe. They pay for that peace of mind. They pay very, very well. He let that sink in. He let them recalibrate their entire understanding of him. The struggling artist was gone. In his place sat one of the most successful and most anonymous architects in his field, a man who could have bought and sold the Argento Club with the money in his checking account. Arthur stared at the magazine cover, then back at the invoices, his mind struggling to connect the two realities. He looked like a man whose map had just been revealed to be a child's drawing. You watched us. He couldn't finish the sentence. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, Liam said, his voice devoid of triumph. It was a simple statement of fact. I let you treat me with condescension. I let you insult my background. I let you parade me around as your little charity project. I paid for this wedding, every last extravagant, unnecessary, status-driven cent of it. I paid for it, and I put it in your name so that you could have the satisfaction of believing you were in control. He leaned forward slightly, the first hint of fire entering his eyes. I did it for one reason. I wanted to see. I wanted to see if the woman I married would ever stand up for the man she chose, or if she would stand by and watch while her parents tried to grind him into dust. He looked at Chloe, whose face was now streaked with silent tears. For 6 months I have watched you. I have listened to you fret about how we would ever pay this back. I have listened to you defend their generosity. Not once, not one single time, did you turn to me and say, "My husband is a good man, and we will build our own life." Not once did you say, "Stop treating him this way." His voice dropped to a near whisper, but it was more devastating than any shout. Your silence was your answer, Chloe. You chose them. You chose the comfort of their world over the integrity of ours. Eleanor, finally finding her voice, let out a choked, furious sound. How dare you? This is a trick. A cruel, elaborate trick. Was it a trick? Liam countered, his gaze unwavering. Or was it a mirror? I just held it up. You're the ones who saw your own reflection and didn't like it. You demanded I pay you back for the wedding. Very well. He gestured to the pile of documents. Consider us even. You got the wedding of your dreams, the status, the praise, the glory. I paid the bill. Your invoice, he picked up the small folded square of paper he'd been given, is irrelevant. He let it drop to the floor. The sound was barely audible, but in the crushing silence of the room, it landed like a guillotine. The performance was over. The reckoning had begun. The aftermath of a bomb is not noise, but a profound, ringing silence. The dining room, which moments before had crackled with tension, was now a vacuum. Arthur Preston stared at the portfolio, his face a mask of gray disbelief. The world, as he knew it, had been inverted. He, the master of the universe, the man who moved markets with a phone call, had been playing a child's game, and he hadn't even known it. He had postured and peacocked, all while the man he disdained had been quietly signing the checks. The humiliation was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his chest. Eleanor was the first to break. Her collapse was not graceful. A choked sob escaped her lips, a sound of pure, undiluted rage. You did this to humiliate us, she hissed, her voice trembling. This was never about love or marriage. It was a trap. You planned this from the very beginning. No, Liam said, his voice still holding that unnerving calm. You are mistaken. I planned for a marriage. I hoped for a partnership. But I also prepared for this, for the reality of who you are. He turned his gaze, soft with a deep, abiding sorrow, to his wife. The trap wasn't for them, Chloe. It was for you. It was a choice. Stand with the man you promised to build a life with, or stand with the people who valued appearance over substance. Every day for the last year, you made your choice, in 100 small ways. Your silence was the loudest sound in my life. Chloe flinched as if struck. The tears that had been welling in her eyes finally spilled over, tracing paths through her makeup. I didn't know, she whispered, the words fractured and small. Liam, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? Why would you let me? Her voice trailed off. Let her be so blind? Let her fail so spectacularly? Tell you what exactly? Liam asked, a genuine question. That I had money? Would that have made you respect me more? Would that have made you defend me? If the answer is yes, then what does that say about us? About you? I didn't want a wife who loved my bank account. I wanted a wife who loved me. The man you thought was a budding architect. The man who came from nothing. The man who wasn't good enough for your parents. I wanted you to choose that man, because that man is who I am. The money is just noise. This was the moral mirror, polished to a perfect, brutal sheen. He was reflecting their own values back at them, and the image was hideous. Arthur, regaining a fraction of his composure, tried to pivot to find a position of power in the rubble. This is an incredible breach of trust, he blustered, his voice raspy. To deceive us, to deceive our daughter, in this manner. It's sociopathic. Liam didn't even flinch at the insult. Let's talk about trust, Arthur, he said, and now his voice took on a new edge. It was the voice of a CEO, a strategist, a man used to dissecting complex problems. Let's list the grievances. Shall we start with the dinner, where you called my grandfather, a man who worked with his hands his entire life to raise me, a tradesman, as if it were a disease? Or the suit fitting, where you announced I needed to be elevated to look like I belonged? Or perhaps the party, where you introduced me to your friends as your pet project, the hard-working boy you were so generously supporting? He paused, letting each charge land. Or we could discuss the constant subtle digs from Eleanor about my palate, my background, my means, the systematic way you dismantled every single idea Chloe and I had for our own wedding, replacing it with your own vision of status. You didn't want to welcome a son into your family. You wanted to acquire a subsidiary. You wanted me to be grateful, indebted, and above all, controllable. He looked from Arthur to Eleanor. You demanded respect based on your wealth. You demanded obedience based on your generosity. You never once tried to earn it. Trust, Arthur, you have no idea what the word means. Trust is what my clients give me with the blueprints to their billion-dollar data centers. Trust is what I gave Chloe, hoping she would see the man, not the facade. You didn't breach my trust. You simply proved you were never worthy of it in the first place. The room was silent again. There was no defense. He had used their own words, their own actions against them. He had built an irrefutable case, not with emotion, but with cold, hard facts. Finally, he turned back to Chloe. The anger in his voice dissipated, replaced by a profound weariness. I love you, Chloe. Or, I love the woman I thought you were. The woman who loved the Japanese garden and the simple sapphire ring. I don't know who this woman is. The one who sat here tonight, ready to watch her husband be saddled with a lifetime of manufactured debt to appease her parents' ego. He stood up, his movements fluid and decisive. He left the portfolio on the table, a monument to their folly. I think I have an answer to the question I've been asking myself for a year, he said softly. He walked over to Chloe, leaned down, and kissed the top of her head. It was a gesture of farewell. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. My lawyer will be in touch. Not with you, he said, looking at Arthur and Eleanor. With Chloe. This is between my wife and me now. You two have done enough. With that, he picked up his briefcase, turned, and walked out of the dining room. He didn't look back. The sound of his footsteps on the marble floor of the foyer was steady and strong. Then, the heavy front door opened and closed with a quiet final click. He was gone. In the dining room, the three of them remained, frozen in a tableau of ruin. Eleanor was weeping openly now, not tears of remorse, but of shattered pride. Arthur sat staring into the middle distance, the gears of his mind grinding, trying to find an angle, a strategy, and coming up with nothing. And Chloe. Chloe sat amidst the wreckage of her marriage, the portfolio of truth lying open on the table like an autopsy report. She looked at the magazine cover with Liam's face on it, a man she realized she never knew at all. She looked at her parents, their faces ugly with shock and fury, and saw them clearly for the first time. The beautiful, generous parents of her childhood were gone, replaced by these two small, arrogant people. She had made her choice, and she had chosen wrong. The silence Liam had left behind was filled with a single screaming realization. She had stood by and watched her parents crucify the best man she had ever known, and she had handed them the nails. The weight of that knowledge was more crushing than any debt. The days that followed were a study in disintegration. Liam was true to his word. He vanished. He didn't answer Chloe's frantic calls or desperate texts. All communication was funneled through a woman named Jessica, a partner at the city's most formidable family law firm. Her correspondence was polite, precise, and utterly impersonal. Chloe, adrift in a sea of regret, tried to talk to her parents, but the conversation was impossible. They were incapable of introspection. Their shock had curdled into a venomous, self-righteous anger. "He's a monster, Chloe," Eleanor declared, pacing the length of her living room, her face blotchy and swollen. "A manipulative, cruel man. To plot something like this, to lay such a trap, it's evil." "He didn't trap you, Mom," Chloe said, her voice tired. "He just let you be yourselves. We're the ones who failed the test." "Test?" Arthur roared, slamming his fist on a side table, rattling a porcelain figurine. "This isn't a university exam. This is our family. He came into our lives, a nobody, and we welcomed him. We gave him everything." "You gave him nothing," Chloe retorted, a spark of her husband's clarity finally igniting within her. "You tried to remake him. You insulted him. You treated him like an employee you were grooming for a promotion he'd never get. I sat there and watched it all." Her voice broke. "I let it happen." This admission of guilt was something they could not process. In their narrative, they were the victims, the benevolent patrons who had been betrayed by a duplicitous viper. Chloe's alignment with Liam's version of events was, to them, the ultimate treason. The conversations grew more heated, more circular, until Chloe couldn't stand to be in the same house with them. She retreated to the large, empty home she had shared with Liam, a place that now felt like a museum of her own failure. Meanwhile, the consequences for the Prestons began to ripple outwards, silently at first, then with devastating speed. The truth did not emerge in a scandalous headline, which would have been their preferred method of combat. Liam was too strategic for that. Instead, it seeped into their social ecosystem like a slow, undetectable poison. Beatrice, the events manager at the Argento Club, mentioned to a board member's wife over lunch that it was such a shame about the Prestons. And wasn't it fascinating that their quiet son-in-law had actually paid for that whole lavish affair? The florist, when complimented on the wedding by another wealthy client, let slip that the bills had gone to a private company, not to Arthur Preston. The owner of Le Papillon Blanc, a notorious gossip, told his favorite customers that the Prestons' credit was apparently not what it used to be. The whispers started. They were subtle but corrosive. In the world the Prestons inhabited, perception was reality. The perception that they had lied, that they had pretended to pay for a wedding they couldn't afford, was more damaging than any financial scandal. Friends became distant. Invitations to exclusive events mysteriously stopped arriving. The Prestons were being quietly, efficiently, and completely erased from the social ledger. The most significant blow, however, came from a direction Arthur never saw coming. His business, a mid-sized investment firm that bore his name, was built on a foundation of aggressive risk and high leverage. He used his social standing and reputation as collateral for his financial maneuvers. As his social capital began to evaporate, his creditors grew nervous. A major loan he had been trying to renegotiate was suddenly called in. Arthur scrambled. He called his contacts, tried to leverage his old power, but found only polite refusals and unreturned calls. The whispers had reached the financial world. He was overextended. He was vulnerable. Ruin, which had always been a theoretical concept for other people, was now a very real possibility. He was facing bankruptcy, the ultimate humiliation. One morning, his top advisor came into his office, his face grim. "We're done, Arthur. There's no way out. We have to start liquidation proceedings." Just as Arthur was about to surrender, a call came. It was from a powerful, notoriously anonymous private equity firm based in Zurich. They'd heard of his temporary liquidity problem. They were willing to make an offer. They would acquire Preston Investments, absorb all its debt, and prevent its collapse. They would even keep Arthur on as a divisional president, a figurehead to ensure a smooth transition. It was a lifeline, but it came at a terrible price. He would go from being the king of his own empire to a salaried employee. He would lose control, ownership, and the name on the door. Swallowing his pride, with no other options, Arthur accepted. Weeks later, after the deal was finalized, Arthur was reviewing the new corporate structure. He asked his new superior, a clipped, efficient man from Zurich, who the ultimate owner of the parent company was. The man smiled thinly. "Our principal values his privacy above all else. He has a number of holding companies. I believe the one that technically owns this division is a small domestic entity. Let me see." He consulted a file. "Ah, yes, here it is. a company called Odyssey Holdings. Arthur Preston felt the floor drop out from under him. He stumbled back into his chair, the blood draining from his face. It was the final, perfect, poetic checkmate. Liam hadn't just exposed him. He hadn't just humiliated him. He had bought him. He had saved him from ruin, only to place him in a cage of his own making. He was now, in the most literal sense, working for Liam Hennessy. The man he had called a nobody now owned his professional life. Chloe knew none of this. She was consumed with her own atonement. She packed up her designer clothes and expensive jewelry and donated them. She sold the luxury car her parents had given her as a wedding present. She began to volunteer at the Japanese garden Liam had designed, weeding, pruning, tending to the place where their story had begun. It was quiet, manual work. It gave her time to think. She realized her entire life had been a passive experience. Things had been given to her, choices made for her. She had floated along on a current of wealth and expectation, never learning to swim on her own. Liam hadn't just been a husband. He had been her first real choice, and she had failed to honor him. After 2 months of silence, she wrote him a letter. Not an email or a text, but a real letter, on simple, plain paper. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame her parents. She took full ownership of her failure. Liam, she wrote, you were right about everything. I was blind, and I was a coward. I valued comfort over character and silence over integrity. I failed you, and I failed myself. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness because I have not yet earned it. I am writing to thank you. You held up a mirror, and while I hated the reflection, I am grateful that you showed it to me. I don't know the woman in that reflection anymore. I am trying to become someone better, someone worthy of the man who loves Japanese gardens and simple sapphire rings. Perhaps one day I will be. She sent the letter to his lawyer's office with no expectation of a reply. She continued her work, her quiet life, attempting to build a foundation of her own, one brick of self-respect at a time. The reckoning had been brutal, but for her, it was also a liberation. 3 weeks after Chloe sent her letter, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Chloe. It was Liam's voice. It was quiet, and it held a universe of complex emotions. But it was his. Her heart leaped into her throat. She couldn't speak. I received your letter, he said. Thank you. There was a long pause. Chloe closed her eyes, clutching the phone. Liam, I'm so sorry, she finally managed to whisper, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. I know, he said, and his voice was gentle. There was no anger left in it, only a deep, resonant sadness. I know you are. Another silence stretched between them, filled with everything that had been broken. Your father is working for me now, he said, not cruelly, but as a statement of fact. Chloe's eyes flew open. What? His company was about to collapse. I bought it. He's been saved from public ruin, but he's lost his empire. I thought you should know. Poetic justice. It was more complete and more devastating than she could have imagined. But Liam's tone wasn't triumphant. It was weary. I didn't do it to punish him, Chloe. Punishment is not the point. I did it because it was a sound business decision. And because it was neat. It closed a circle. He wanted to own me, and now I own him. The lesson is there for him to learn, if he's capable of it. And my mother? She asked, her voice trembling. Your mother's punishment is social extinction, Liam said frankly. In her world, that's a fate worse than death. They built their house on the sand of public opinion, and the tide came in. He had orchestrated it all with the precision of an architect designing a building, ensuring every load-bearing wall of their arrogance failed at once. But he had not been needlessly cruel. He hadn't destroyed Arthur, merely demoted him. He hadn't slandered Eleanor, merely allowed the truth to do its work. He had maintained the moral high ground, even in his victory. What you did, Chloe started. It was brilliant and terrible. It was necessary, he corrected. They left me no other path. But this call isn't about them. It's about you and about us. Chloe held her breath. This was it, the final judgment. You said in your letter that you are trying to become someone better, Liam said. I see that. Marcus, my advisor. He keeps an eye on things. He told me you sold your car. He told me you've been working at the garden. He told me you haven't spoken to your parents in a month. He had been watching over her. The thought was both terrifying and comforting. A foundation isn't built in a day, Chloe, he continued, his voice echoing the lessons of his grandfather. It's built stone by stone. You've laid the first few stones. It's a start. Is it enough? She whispered, tears streaming down her face once more. But these were not tears of shame or regret. They were tears of a fragile, burgeoning hope. Liam was silent for a long time. She could hear him breathe, the sound of fragile thread connecting them across the distance. I don't know, he said finally, and his honesty was a balm. I honestly don't know if the damage can be undone. What they did and what you allowed, it cut very deep. But, he hesitated, the woman who wrote that letter, the woman who is spending her days with her hands in the dirt in our garden, I'd like to meet her. I think I would like her very much. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation. But it was a door, left slightly ajar. The garden, he said. Tomorrow, at noon, by the stone lantern. I'll be there, Chloe said, her voice thick with emotion. Good, he said. We can see what's left to build with. And if the foundation is strong enough to start again. He hung up. Chloe lowered the phone, her hand shaking. She looked out the window of the home that had been a prison of her own making. For the first time in months, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. It wasn't a happy ending. It was something far more realistic and far more precious. It was a chance to rebuild from the ground up on a new foundation of honesty, integrity, and hard-earned self-worth. The reckoning was over. The redemption was just beginning. True worth is not about what you have, but who you are. Liam never sought revenge, only truth. He wanted a partner who saw his value, not his balance sheet. The Prestons learned the hard way that arrogance is a fragile shield against reality, and that respect must be earned, never demanded. For Chloe, the painful journey was one of self-discovery, learning that true strength comes from standing for what is right, even when it is difficult. What do you think? Can a relationship like Liam and Chloe's truly be rebuilt after such a deep betrayal of trust? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for joining us for this story. If you found it satisfying, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content that proves that patience and integrity are the ultimate powers. We'll see you in the next one.